They waited for you to swing back. They wanted noise, drama, a clash that would feed their need to feel important. You pulled off the deadliest move they never expected when you refused to play their game at all. You stepped out of the ring and changed the rules without warning. No arguments, no grand speeches, only direction and discipline. That is what breaks people who live on reaction. They plan for your rage, not your restraint. You let your results do the talking while they wasted breath trying to bait you. You became the calm that unsettled everyone who needs chaos for oxygen. You moved the battleground from emotions to outcomes, and in that quiet relocation, their power dissolved. The deadliest move was not a strike. It was the cold decision to make their tactics irrelevant while you kept building a life that could not be touched by their noise. They studied your buttons like a map. They knew how to prod, how to humiliate, how to spread doubt. Your move was to remove the buttons. You practiced self-control until delay became your weapon. 10 seconds of breathing, 1 night of sleep before responding, a week of silence before deciding. That pause turned their attacks into echoes. People who plot expect an instant reaction because speed keeps you sloppy. You chose latency and clarity. You started answering after the flame had burned out, and your words carried the weight of someone who cannot be dragged. The psychology is simple. When you control your response window, you control the frame. They launch fireworks and watch them fade in the sky, while you quietly rearrange the ground beneath them. The deadliest move was timing that made their heat look childish and your cold look royal. They aimed for your mind, so you cut their supply lines. You stopped feeding them data. No oversharing, no telegraphing goals, no daily updates for them to twist. You let your circle shrink until only those who protect your peace remained. Privacy became armor. Routine became camouflage. You went gray to their eyes while going gold in your results. They could not form a strategy without information, and they panicked when their usual tricks failed. Snakes cannot strike what they cannot locate. Heaters cannot predict what they cannot measure. Your move was starvation. You starved their narratives by refusing to be a source. While they guessed, you executed. While they posted, you prepared. The silence felt like darkness to them, but to you it was night vision. You saw everything while they saw nothing. That imbalance is deadly because it ends the game before they realize it started. They expected cruelty from you. You chose something sharper. You chose strategic kindness with hard edges. Polite greetings, firm boundaries, no gossip, no retaliation, only receipts of consistency. That move disarmed their script. Villains of small minds need you to look like a monster so their story makes sense. You refused to provide the performance. You stayed civil in public and selective in private. You let their anger flash while your grace stayed steady. Not because you are soft, but because you are deliberate. Reputation is leverage. You protected yours like a vault. When the dust settled, they held a handful of accusations, and you held a record that spoke for itself. The deadliest move was elegance with a locked door, kindness that never lowered your guard, and a smile that told the room you could end the scene but chose not to. They searched for secrets to weaponize. You took the blade from their hand by owning everything first. Radical self-honesty became your shield. You named your flaws in the mirror, faced your patterns, paid your debts, healed your triggers, and tightened your boundaries. You became unblackmailable. That move terrifies people who trade in shame. They cannot control the one who has nothing to hide. You stopped pretending and started improving. You stopped defending and started changing. When critics tried to drag out your past, they found it already integrated into your growth. There was nothing left to expose. That is lethal to gossip, because gossip needs shadows to survive. You turned on the lights. The deadliest move was building a self that could not be twisted, a self that turns every accusation into a reminder that you upgraded while they stagnated. They prayed you would keep trying to win on motivation alone. You buried that hope under systems. You built simple daily processes that did not ask your mood for permission. Sleep on time, train the body, read, build, ship, review, repeat. Boring to them, brutal to resistance. Compounding is quiet until it is not. Weeks turned into months, months into momentum, momentum into mastery. They wanted to outperform you with a round of fireworks. You outlasted them with a lighthouse that never went dark. Systems make talent look inevitable and jealousy look ridiculous. When you automate the fundamentals, you free your mind for precision. That freedom is lethal in any arena, because it makes you dependable when others are sporadic. The deadliest move was treating discipline like oxygen and letting consistency do what talent alone cannot. They wanted you trapped inside the argument. You walked away at the peak of their performance and let the room watch the echo. Departure can be a blade when done with dignity. You did not slam doors. You closed them quietly and did not return. That absence stole their audience because the show only made sense if you stayed on stage. You gave them the spotlight and exposed the emptiness of their act. Social dynamics favor the one who does not chase. Respect follows the one who refuses to beg. Your distance told a story that no speech could match. You showed that you are not held by anyone who mocks your peace. The deadliest move was a clean exit paired with undeniable progress afterward, a message that said you do not punish people, you replace them. They trained for yesterday's version of you. You made yesterday obsolete. You learned new skills, altered your environment, changed your diet, refined your style, enlarged your network, and reset your standards. You performed a quiet identity upgrade while they rehearsed attacks for a person who no longer exists. That mismatch broke their plans. You outgrew the trap. Growth that changes your baseline is hard to counter because it makes entire strategies irrelevant. People who knew the old access codes will rage when nothing opens anymore. You will not shrink to fit doors you have outgrown. The deadliest move was evolution without announcement, a steady reinvention that made every room feel different when you entered, because the person walking in had been rebuilt from the bones up. They threw deadlines on your dream, hoping pressure would make you surrender. You married patience to precision and turned time into a partner. Long horizons break short thinkers. You did not sprint for applause. You planted for harvest. You set milestones, tracked lead indicators, and forgave yourself when progress was slow as long as the line kept rising. That patience made you dangerous because it stripped desperation from your choices. Desperation leads to bad deals, to chasing, to over-explaining. You moved with quiet confidence that outcomes arrive when inputs are honored. By the time they noticed, you were too far ahead for sabotage to matter. The deadliest move was trusting the compounding of calm effort, then letting years do what days cannot. They wanted a war. You built a world. You stopped proving and started producing. You forgave without granting access. You wished them peace from a distance and kept your gate closed. You invested in health, wealth, and spirit until your life spoke louder than any comeback. Their accusations aged. Your work matured. That contrast wrote the ending for you. The deadliest move was not a dramatic strike. It was the quiet creation of a reality where their existence no longer affects the weather. You made yourself the climate. You became the standard you once searched for. And now the power sits where it always belonged, inside the hands that chose growth over games, silence over spectacle, and destiny over distraction. Patience is the weapon most people never master. They live on impulse, on chasing highs, on needing immediate results to feel alive. They can plan for tomorrow, but never for 10 years. That is why the most dangerous player is the one willing to wait longer than anyone else. You became that player. You stopped needing recognition in the moment and built a foundation that could outlast storms. They mocked your pace, laughed at your silence, dismissed your discipline. They wanted quick wins, you wanted an endgame. And when the dust settled, you were still there while they had burned themselves out. The danger of patience is not that it is slow, it is that it creates inevitability. You didn't need to rush toward power. You let power come to you by waiting while they wasted everything trying to arrive first. They wanted to pull you into a race. They thought speed would overwhelm you. They wanted panic to be your fuel. But you never joined their sprint. You stayed steady, walking at your own rhythm, ignoring the pace they tried to force on you. That unsettled them because patience is unpredictable. Impulse can be read. Rush can be manipulated. But someone who waits, someone who pauses, someone who refuses to break their stride, that person terrifies opponents who only know how to win fast. You didn't need to chase them. You let them exhaust themselves, let them run in circles, and when they were out of breath, you were still fresh. The most dangerous player doesn't move first. The most dangerous player waits until the timing guarantees victory. Patience in relationships is just as lethal. They expected you to beg, to chase, to prove yourself the moment they pulled away. You didn't. You gave them space, not to punish, but to watch. You let their patterns reveal themselves while you sat back and studied. That patience saved you from false love and shallow loyalty. They couldn't understand why their games didn't shake you. But that is the gift of waiting. You don't need to react to manipulation. You let the truth show itself over time, and time always shows everything. They miscalculated because they assumed you feared being alone. Instead, you made peace with solitude. And someone at peace with solitude becomes unstoppable, because they never trade patience for attention. In self-growth, patience is the most overlooked discipline. Everyone wants the transformation now. Everyone wants results today. They start, they quit, they restart, they collapse. You didn't play that cycle. You chose the grind. You chose to wait for the long harvest. You trusted the daily routines, the small inputs, the invisible work. People laughed because they couldn't see anything changing. But you knew what they didn't. Compounding is invisible until it isn't. The body doesn't transform overnight. The The skills don't sharpen instantly, but day by day the unseen builds until it becomes undeniable. By waiting longer, you became the one who actually achieved what they only talked about. Patience in war is cruel. Snakes and haters want immediate impact. They expect you to fire back the moment they attack. That is how they control the narrative. But you didn't respond on their timeline. You let them scream, accuse, perform. You let them reveal their hand completely. And then, when the noise had faded and no one cared anymore, you made your move. That patience killed them because their entire advantage came from chaos. When you refused to move under chaos, they lost control. And when you finally acted, it was clean, devastating, and irreversible. The most dangerous player is not the one with the loudest weapon. It is the one who decides when to use it, even if that means waiting years. Psychology proves this. People who cannot delay gratification sabotage themselves. They chase pleasure now at the cost of strength later. Critics, manipulators, haters, they all operate in short-term loops. They need quick results to validate their behavior. That's why they crumble against someone patient. You didn't let your emotions dictate your timing. You let strategy dictate it. Every move you made had weight because it was calculated, not rushed. They could not pull you into their impulsive storms. You let them destroy themselves with their own impatience. That is the silent danger of patience. It doesn't just protect you, it weaponizes their weakness. They tried to label you boring, slow, even passive. But that is because they confused patience with stagnation. You weren't still, you were building. You weren't quiet, you were listening. You weren't waiting for life to happen. You were stacking bricks while everyone else chased fireworks. That is why the moment you revealed your progress, it felt like an ambush. They never saw it coming because patience is invisible until it detonates. What they dismissed as inaction was the most dangerous preparation of all. Waiting longer is not about inaction, it is about resilience. It is about surviving seasons others cannot survive. They quit when it rains. You plant in the storm, they quit when it's lonely. You learn to befriend solitude, they quit when it's hard. You learn to enjoy the difficulty. Patience is not just waiting, it is enduring with intent. And endurance is what breaks your opponents, because nothing terrifies someone more than realizing you will outlast them no matter how long the game takes. In every field, the impatient collapse. Businesses fail because they can't wait for momentum. Relationships fail because people can't wait for trust to grow. Dreams fail because people can't wait for the grind to pay off. But you played differently. You were willing to wait longer, willing to endure more, willing to stay committed past the point most people tap out. That willingness made you the most dangerous player in every room. Because when everyone else quit, you were still there, still moving, still standing. They never feared the strike itself. They feared the knowledge that you saw them before they even moved. That is the kind of awareness that strips away illusions. They wanted to believe you were naive, that their whispers and games could slip past unnoticed. They tried to test you, waiting for signs of confusion, waiting for mistakes that would prove you blind. But every time you already knew. You were aware of the patterns behind their words, the shadows behind their smiles, the weight behind their silences. That awareness made them hesitate. It made them realize their tricks were no longer effective. The move you made mattered less than the fact that you saw their game before it started. Awareness is power because it creates inevitability. They could play, but you were always 2 steps beyond, shaping the outcome with your silence. That was the fear. They were never hidden from you. They believed exposure would break you. They thought if they played you long enough, their schemes would collapse your faith. But the awareness you carried meant their exposure only broke them. You didn't need to confront them immediately. You let their mask slip on its own. You saw the contradictions in their words. You noticed the tension in their actions. You watched how their loyalty only existed when it was convenient. Every detail they thought was invisible you caught. And instead of reacting, you stored it, piece by piece, until the full picture was undeniable. That calm knowing unsettled them. They expected resistance. You gave them patience. That patience revealed their entire structure before they could even adjust. They realized too late that the one they thought was in the dark had been watching the whole time. In relationships, awareness is the ultimate betrayal of their illusion. They thrive on secrecy, on creating versions of themselves that hide the flaws. They assumed you were too trusting, too eager to love, too willing to believe. But you saw it all. You recognized when affection was performance. You recognized when promises were fragile. You saw through the patterns of hot and cold behavior. You knew when words didn't match the effort. And the silence of your awareness cut deeper than any argument could. Because once someone knows you see through them, their entire act collapses. They lose their stage, they lose their mask. and they lose the control they thought they had. What they feared was not confrontation. It was exposure without a word. Awareness and self-growth is dangerous because it removes excuses. You didn't hide behind lies about yourself. You faced your flaws, your weaknesses, your patterns. That level of self-awareness made you unstoppable because it meant no one could use your shadows against you. They feared that too. They wanted to remind you of mistakes, to weaponize your past. But you had already studied it. You had already integrated it. You were aware of your own scars, which meant no one could turn them into shame. The most dangerous version of you is the one who is aware of everything inside and outside, because that awareness means you walk without denial. They couldn't control you through guilt because you already faced it head-on. They wanted you blind so they could lead you. They wanted you deaf so they could narrate the story for you. But you didn't need their guidance. You saw the truth beneath every surface. When they plotted, you saw the greed in their eyes. When they lied, you felt the hesitation in their tone. When they pretended to care, you noticed the hollowness in their follow-through. That is the curse of awareness. You cannot unsee what you see. And for them, that was terrifying, because they realized they weren't tricking you. They were performing for someone who had already memorized the script. That realization broke their confidence more than any counterattack could. Awareness changes the balance of power. Most people fight in the open. Aware people fight in silence. You didn't need to expose them the first time. You let them run in their circle, convinced you were clueless. That gave you leverage. They thought they had time. They thought they had cover. But in reality, you had already calculated the exit. You had already built the distance. You had already prepared for their betrayal. So when it came, you didn't break. You pivoted. And the swiftness of your shift stunned them. The fear wasn't in the betrayal failing. It was in realizing it had been anticipated all along. In life, people fear being truly seen. They craft identities, wear masks, and hide their motives. Your awareness stripped all of that away. You didn't call them out immediately because silence was louder. You let them live with the discomfort of knowing you knew. That is why they stayed restless around you. They couldn't relax because they were waiting for your move. And that is the cruelty of awareness. You become unpredictable. They don't know when you will reveal, when you will act, or when you will leave. They only know that you already see, and nothing destabilizes a snake faster than the knowledge that its camouflage failed. They expected ignorance, you gave them clarity. They expected collapse. You gave them composure. Awareness makes you unshakable because you no longer need illusions. You know who they are. You know who you are. And once you know, you don't beg for explanations. You don't chase closure. You don't waste energy asking why. You already know. That is what makes you lethal. While they scramble to hide, you have already built your exit, planned your next move, and adjusted your circle. They are left behind, panicked by the truth that they were always transparent. What unsettled them most was not your strength. It was your vision. They could accept losing to someone stronger, but not to someone who simply saw through them. They feared your awareness because it meant their greatest weapon, deception, no longer had power. They could not spin lies when you already knew the truth. They could not twist the story when you had already written your own. That kind of power is silent, but it is absolute. They didn't just fear your move. They feared the mind behind it, a mind awake and untouchable. They wanted you inside their arena. They wanted you to swing wildly, argue loudly, and crumble under the weight of their conditions. Their entire strategy depended on you playing the role they had written for you. They rehearsed the scenes, prepared their comebacks, polished their manipulation. They were ready for the version of you that would act in rage, that would beg for understanding, that would try to win validation on their stage. But you pulled the rug from under them. You didn't read from their script. You didn't play their game. Instead, you dismantled them by choosing silence when they wanted noise, calm when they wanted fire, and movement when they wanted stagnation. That is why they collapsed. Not because you overpowered them, but because you never gave them the performance they were counting on. They thought you'd shout back. They thought you'd compete for the last word, wrestle for attention, or throw your dignity into the pit of chaos. They planned for your breakdown, but you chose detachment instead. You watched them burn energy trying to provoke you, and you refused to hand them the fuel. That alone killed their script. Every manipulator needs a stage, and the stage only exists if you stand on it with them. You stepped away and turned their production into a one-person play. The audience they expected to win over saw only their desperation. By refusing to perform, you revealed their emptiness. You didn't fight harder. You fought smarter by not fighting at all. That was the dismantling. In relationships, people expect you to engage with their cycles. They leave to make you chase. They lie to make you react. They withdraw to make you beg. That is their script. But when you stopped chasing, stopped explaining, stopped begging, their act lost power. They had built their identity on controlling your emotions, but you refused to let them. You dismantled the illusion by doing nothing they had prepared for. That absence of compliance made them unravel faster than any confrontation would have. They didn't fear losing you. They feared losing their script, because without it, they were exposed as weak. In life, critics expect you to argue your worth. They expect you to debate, defend, prove. Their script depends on you validating their role as judge. You dismantled them by moving in silence and letting your results speak. You didn't stand in court when they called you. You built an empire outside their reach. And when your success appeared, it crushed them because their words no longer mattered. Critics only exist if you give them oxygen. You smothered them with indifference. The deadliest move was not resistance. It was indifference sharpened into a blade. They feared unpredictability because unpredictability is freedom. They memorized your past responses, then planned their schemes around them. They believed people never change. But you evolved. You grew unpredictable by breaking your own patterns. You didn't go where they thought you would. You didn't react in the ways you once did. That shift was devastating to them. Because snakes survive on routine, manipulators thrive on habits. When you broke the script, you broke the hold they thought they had on you. They discovered you were no longer the same opponent, and there is nothing scarier than fighting someone who refuses to stay in the box you built for them. The psychology behind your move was simple. Scripts exist to trap the mind. They want you to think in predictable lines so they can anticipate your every move. But when you free yourself from that mental cage, they are the ones who get trapped. You didn't just break the script. They stayed stuck inside it. They were reading lines to a stage that no longer existed. They didn't just lose the game. They lost their sense of identity because their power was tied to your compliance. That is the cruelty of refusing to follow the script. You not only win, you erase the entire game. They imagined themselves clever. They pictured themselves victorious, pulling strings while you danced like a puppet. That fantasy fueled their arrogance. But the moment you cut the strings, they were the ones left exposed. The more you ignored the pull, the more foolish they looked holding strings that no longer connected to anything. Their frustration grew louder while your silence grew heavier. You dismantled their authority by showing everyone that their influence was an illusion. What they thought was control was nothing but noise. By stepping outside their design, you revealed how small they truly were. Every dismantling comes with restraint. You didn't need to expose every detail, didn't need to call them out in every room. You let them reveal themselves by their own persistence. They kept trying, louder and louder, while you refused to join. And slowly the weight of their effort became their undoing. They thought they had the upper hand, but they ended up drowning in their own performance. Meanwhile, you were already past them, building something greater. That contrast was your victory. By refusing to fight their way, you proved the war was never on their terms. They are still replaying the scenes in their head, trying to figure out where they lost. But the truth is, they lost before it began. They lost the moment they assumed you would act in predictable ways. They lost when they underestimated your ability to detach, to adapt, to walk away. Their entire plot collapsed not because you fought them, but because you didn't. That is the kind of dismantling that cuts deepest. You didn't just beat them. You invalidated their entire existence in your story. They cannot survive in silence. Your march terrified them because it created a silence they didn't know how to handle. Every step you took forward was a reminder that they had lost control. They wanted you stuck replaying their words, their rejections, their betrayal. Instead, you used all of it as fuel. That's the part they never calculated. That hate is powerless in the hands of someone who converts it into momentum.